are the aims of the FLQ manifesto.
Les gars du front nous ont peut-être un petit peu fait comprendre ça.
Maybe the guys of the FLQ succeeded in making us understand to a certain extent. We are going to organize ourselves intelligently, we're going to choose our own positions, and we shall overcome.
But the Canadian Army is already moving into Quebec. The Montreal and Quebec governments formally request that Ottawa take urgent action. At 4 a.m. that morning, Trudeau's government invokes the War Measures Act, claiming that there is a state of apprehended insurrection in Quebec. Unaware that the law of the land had changed while they were sleeping, hundreds of astonished and outraged people find themselves abruptly taken from their homes in the dead of night and imprisoned. These people are to discover that under the War Measures Act, they can be kept incommunicado, that they will not be able to be bailed out immediately, that they can be kept in prison for up to 90 days without a trial, and that being a member of the FLQ has suddenly and retroactively become a crime, punishable by up to 5 years in prison.
Oh, wow.
Bourassa explains why he made his request to Ottawa.
Well, just yesterday you called in the Canadian Army. Again, you said at Quebec's request that it came to Quebec. Was that not enough to protect our democratic institutions, as you mentioned in the National Assembly?
They were to police action in order to find ways and in order to find Mr. Laporte and Mr. Cross. Obviously, they need some additional powers to be efficient. So the army was called to protect the population because there were a lot of public buildings which were unprotected and which need protection, but there were also the efficiency of the police action, and this was the reason why we decided to ask the federal government to pass these, to give these additional powers.
How bad is the situation? If I can quote from your communique here, you mention renverser le gouvernement, overthrow the government. Was that far advanced?
It was well known that there was a plan, but a small group of people, but even if this
How small a group?
Well, perhaps a few hundred people, but they were strong enough to create a lot of trouble. They start with violent meetings. After that, they had recourse to bombs and now to kidnappings. So we have to stop that because where it will finish. So it's not a question of limiting the civil liberties of the people. It's a question of staying in a democratic system. The total population, the almost total population in Quebec and in Canada are for a democratic system. So we have to defend that will of the people.
You mentioned 3 points, and earlier today your Minister of Finance mentioned 4 points: demonstrations, bombing, kidnappings, and selective assassination.
Yes.
Are you satisfied that these terrorists were prepared to go that far?
We have no clear indication that they were prepared to go that far, but obviously, clearly, we have no choice but to take no risk. Mm-hmm. They accomplished the first 3 steps. Why we should take risk that they will kill people? Mm-hmm. So our clear duty was to stop that. And it was our obvious responsibility, and we assumed that responsibility.
You spoke of a threat to democratic institutions again yesterday. Is it not possible that many people in this country will feel that the government itself has now carried out a threat to democracy and limiting civil rights so severely?
But it's not a question of limiting civil rights on a permanent basis. It's only a question of limited and part civil rights in order to protect the system, in order to protect the regime. This is exactly what we are doing. There is limits for tolerance. When excessive tolerance is endangering, is creating a serious danger for our democratic system.
Thousands of soldiers, many of them unilingual English, cover Quebec.
Okay.
Elsewhere in Canada, everyone chooses their position, most for, some against, the government's drastic action. The Premier of Ontario, John Robarts, had announced that Canada was in a state of total war. Certainly, Canadians were unaccustomed to having soldiers patrolling their streets. But the biggest peacetime intervention of the Army in Canada's history only forced the incredulous and depressed Quebec population to ask themselves once again, what would Ottawa do if Quebec ever did vote for independence? The Army did allow the police to get on with their desperate search for Cross and Laporte. Search warrants are no longer required, so all over Quebec, houses are broken into and searched, and possible clues or evidence are indiscriminately carted away. Uninformed, the opposition parties react as best they can.
But now we have Tommy Douglas. Douglas, you described this as Black Friday. Would you care to elaborate?
Well, I think it is Black Friday when government, for the first time in history, invokes the War Measures Act in peacetime and says that there's an apprehended state of insurrection and deprives a great many people of their freedom and their liberty. This means that right now the police at any time can pick up any person who, in their opinion, is a member of an organization that is subversive and illegal. They can hold them for 90 days without bringing them to trial, without giving them any chance to prove their innocence. At the end of 90 days, they have the right to appeal to a superior court judge, who then sets the date for their trial.
Because what would you suggest that the government do?
To give them extensive powers. Don't quarrel with that at all. But surely those powers should be granted by Parliament in a free country and not seized by the government under the pretext that we're faced with an insurrection.
But in your view, the government has not justified a state of apprehension. What is it? A state of insurrection?
They claim it's a state of apprehended insurrection. Now, these acts of sabotage by the FLQ have been going on for 6 or 7 years. And if the government needed more power, they could have asked for amendments to the criminal code anytime in the 3 years that Mr. Trudeau was Minister of Justice or in the 2 years that he'd been Prime Minister. We would have granted such powers if the government could show us that the powers they have are not adequate and that the situation is such that it justifies additional powers. But they haven't come near Parliament for these powers. They've taken these powers unto themselves. And no Prime Minister and no Cabinet in the history of Canada has had the wide sweeping powers in peacetime that this Cabinet now has.
Yes, Mr. Diefenbaker, the former Prime Minister. Mr. Diefenbaker, has the government convinced you of the need for these measures?
After listening to the Prime Minister, I'm convinced that the government is simply not facing realities. That for over a year, it has known of these thugs. It's kept them either on the Radio Canada or Chartrand has been around. He wasn't found until 4 o'clock this morning. Strange thing that these people who have been preaching revolution, the government has known of it, are suddenly picked up when they could have been picked up a year ago on charges of sedition and convicted on the basis of the statements they were making.
Are you saying then you're satisfied that they have in fact been picked up now?
Well, I've been told they are, and I believe anyone who
So
said...
you approve that? You would approve that?
Oh, absolutely. You should have done it a year ago, and there wouldn't have had this revolutionary situation that permitted the kidnapping of these two innocent men. But it's a government that refused to act. I asked over and over again of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Regional Affairs, both these Americans coming into Canada, preaching revolution, bloodshed, revolution. And the answer given me was, that's freedom of speech. As long as they speak to selected groups, if they don't make it too public. Well, they found the opportunity to make it very public by using TV media across the country. They preached their doctrine of revolution. And what's happening now is we have the fruit of the family tree of the present government and its predecessor that adopted an attitude of permissiveness to obvious crime.
It is still Friday, October the 16th, and the atmosphere in Quebec is far from permissive, as the arrests mount into the hundreds and the searches into the thousands. The soldiers police, and the police search. Canada waits to hear why the War Measures Act has been invoked for the first time in peacetime, and why the Canadian Bill of Rights is suspended. That evening, Canadians from coast to coast listen while the actions of his government are explained on national television by Prime Minister Trudeau.
Let me turn now to the broader implications of the threat represented by the FLQ and similar organizations. If a democratic society is to continue to exist, it must be able to root out the cancer of an armed revolutionary movement that is bent on destroying the very basis of our freedoms. For that reason, the government, following an analysis of the facts, including the requests of the government of Quebec and of the City of Montreal for urgent action, decided to proclaim the War Measures Act. It did so at 4 a.m. this morning in order to permit the full weight of government to be brought quickly to bear on all those persons advocating or practicing violence as a means of achieving political ends. At the moment, the FLQ is holding hostage 2 men in the Montreal area, one a British diplomat, the other a Quebec cabinet minister. They are threatened with murder. Should the governments give in to this crude blackmail, we would be facing the breakdown of the legal system and its replacement by the law of the jungle. The government's decision to prevent this from happening is not taken just to defend an important principle. It is taken to protect the lives of Canadians from dangers of the sort I have mentioned. Freedom and personal security are safeguarded by laws. Those laws must be respected in order to be effective. The criminal law as it stands is simply not adequate to deal with systematic terrorism. The police have therefore been given certain extraordinary powers necessary for the effective detection and elimination of conspiratorial organizations which advocate the use of violence. These organizations and membership in them have been declared illegal. The powers include the right to search and arrest without warrant, to detain suspected persons without the necessity of laying specific charges immediately, and to detain persons without bail. These are strong powers, and I find them as distasteful as I am sure you do.
Let me say at the outset that I am as repelled by the activities of these terrorists as any other Canadian. In a society such as ours, terrorism is an ugly and unnecessary cancer that we must do everything to eliminate. Everything, that is, except change the very nature of our free society that we are trying, in fact, to protect. In the process of defending freedom, we must not destroy it. In the process of protecting democracy, we must reduce to a necessary minimum any departure from democratic procedures. I want to make it clear that action is necessary and that the government must have the necessary power to deal with this small group of ruthless men.
The information we do have showed a situation of criminal acts and criminal conspiracy in Quebec, but there is no information that there was unintended or apprehended or planned insurrection, which alone could justify invoking the War Measures Act.
The next day, Saturday, October the 17th, with over 300 people already in prison, organized public reaction gets underway in Quebec. The civil rights groups defy the War Measures Act and meet at the University of Montreal. They condemn the government's action. And all over Quebec, students meet to protest and to organize walkouts. The University of Quebec closes down, followed by most of the other universities in the province. While some French Canadians hide from the police, the government suggests that a number of prominent English Canadians leave Quebec for their own safety. But most people nervously lie low at home and follow the events as best they can on radio and television. That afternoon, Saturday, October the 17th, the government has agreed to fly the kidnappers to Cuba should they give themselves up. An aeroplane waits on the tarmac at Dorval. But it is too late. That evening, the airways are filled with stories of death.
A few moments ago, we received confirmation that the bodies of Mr. Laporte and Mr. Cross have been discovered. The newsroom at Telemedia is trying to obtain more information, which will be passed on to you in a few minutes.
Is there any mention of Cross? It's not confirmed. Okay. Network music. We should like to remind listeners once again that 11:10 p.m. exactly, close to St. Hubert Airport, that the car which was used 1 week ago to kidnap Pierre Laporte in front of his home on Robitaille Street at St. Lambert was formally identified. The Quebec police force is on its way to Rawdon, where the body of Mr. James Richard Cross is said to have been discovered. He is the second hostage who was kidnapped a little over 2 weeks ago. Mr. Cross is the senior British Trade Commissioner. Several Montreal radio stations have already announced the death of Mr. Cross, but no official police confirmation has been received yet. At exactly 12:25, or rather at 0:25, by 25 minutes after midnight, the trunk of the car was finally opened and the body of Mr. Laporte was discovered, covered in blood. CKAC, Telemedia, first with the news. We'll be back in a few moments. Oman Maltese, Telemedia, Drill. Laporte's body is in this car, found by two journalists, one of whom was Claude Lachance.
And then we called the police, who took about half an hour to get here.
Did you expect to discover the body?
Yes. Yes, because knowing the FLQ, they never lied in the communiques. Finding the car with the license number, which they had indicated, it was 90% sure that there was something in it. And it had to be the body of Laporte. We didn't expect to find any dynamite. I was about 100 feet from the car, 75 feet from the car, because the police wouldn't let us come near, especially as there could have been dynamite. We didn't know what was in the trunk. All the police told us was that there was something very heavy in the trunk of the car. And they opened it, and the policeman who opened the trunk, he was from the bomb disposal unit. And they opened the trunk, and they said that there was indeed a man in the trunk. We tried to get closer, but the police wouldn't let us. All we could see was some white clothes with bloodstains on them. And then a few minutes later, the men from the identification squad arrived, and they removed the clothes, and we recognized the body of Laporte. I saw him because when he was taking out of the trunk, I caught a glimpse of his body very, very briefly. He was wearing a sweater, a small sweater, pushed to here. His wrists were wrapped in blood-stained towels. I couldn't see his face, but they told me that his cheeks were very swollen and that he had blood on his nostrils here, on the nose and the mouth. The communique said, I can almost quote it, faced with the arrogance of the federal government and of its lackey Bourassa, the FLQ decided to take action. Mr. Pierre Laporte, Minister of Unemployment and Assimilation, was assassinated this evening at 18 minutes past 6 by the Dieppe cell, and in brackets, the 22nd Regiment. You will find the body in the trunk of a green Chevrolet, bearing license number 9J2420. The Front de Libération du Québec, we shall overcome. And there was some indication of where the car was parked, a sort of little sketch of the surrounding area. And a bit lower it was written, warning to all the capitalists in Quebec. And how does it go exactly? Let everyone be on his guard, or something like that. I forget the last sentence, but it goes something like this. And from now on, this is the way things are going to be. Now, this very evening, it is clear that the silent revolution is dead. I have the impression that the real revolution is beginning, that some sort of civil war is stirring in Quebec, and that something extremely serious just happened. A lot of stupid things are going to happen from now on. People will perhaps be tempted to kill indiscriminately.
Et je souhaite au peuple canadien de rester uni dans cette épreuve. Et maintenant en anglais, s'il vous plaît. Well, it was shock and consternation, I believe, that all Canadians have learned of the death of Mr. Pierre Laporte, who was so cowardly assassinated by a band of murderers. And I can't help feeling, as a Canadian, a deep sense of shame that this cruel and senseless act should have been conceived in cold blood and executed in like manner. And I want to express to Mrs. Laporte and to Mr. Laporte's family the very deep regrets of the Canadian people, of the Canadian government, and our desire as Canadians to stick together in this very sorry moment of our history. What could you tell us, Mr. Thomas, about the kind of people you're dealing with? I can't tell you anything more. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Sunday, October the 18th. A sermon is given by Laporte's old friend, Mayor of Montreal, Jean Drapeau.
Is it a warning addressed to all those who hold public office that they will not only be suppressed or assassinated, but that it will be done in the most cruel manner? If there is a lesson that we should accept, if there is a message, and I'm sure that this must have been the last thought of Pierre Laporte, it is that his sacrifice should not have been consented in vain. That all men holding public office should have the courage to continue.
Those responsible for this crime will be found and will be dealt with in the calm and dispassionate atmosphere of Canadian courts. The FLQ has sown the seeds of its own destruction. It has revealed that it has no mandate but terror, no policies but violence, and no solutions but murder.
If you could emphasize that part of it for us, that we're not making it's not a time for
I'll follow your questions.
What I really did.
No, I'll do it myself if I can.
Do a 60 for me.
How long do you want to?
I want a 60 second.
No, honestly, I can't do that. No.
How long?
Well, I don't know, but if you want 60 seconds, get it from somebody else. I don't want airtime. I couldn't care less about goddamn airtime.
No, it's not airtime.
I'm not going to distort things.
No, don't.
No,
sorry.
The hell with that.
Okay, all right.
This thing is no.
We'll do it your way.
This thing is. Look, God damn it, we're not a soap opera.
I know
And
that.
we're not a soap advertisement. If you want
This
that,
way-
get it somewhere else.
No, we're not looking for that.
Well, you
You
are
ready,
with
Bob?
60 seconds.
Well,
Guy dies. Our opinion. Oh, shit.
yes, go ahead. Okay, you running? Could you express your view and that which you have expressed already today for us, please?
Yes. Well, basically, speaking for the Parti Québécois, but also in conjunction with people from the unions.
What did I miss?
They start with the
Ask for amendments to the criminal code anytime in the.
Or not miss?
Mr. Laporte and Mr. Cross have been discovered. The newsroom at Telemedia is trying to obtain more information which will be passed on to you in a few minutes.
Is there any mention of Cross? It's not confirmed. Okay. Network music.
L'émission spéciale de Télévision, voici Normand Maltais.
Chers auditeurs, nous vous rappelons.
We should like to remind listeners once again that 11:10 p.m. exactly, close to St. Hubert Airport, that the car which was used 1 week ago to kidnap Pierre Laporte in front of his home on Robitaille Street at St. Lambert was formally identified.
What?
The Quebec police force is on its way to Rawdon, where the body of Mr. James Richard Cross is said to have been discovered. He is the second hostage who was kidnapped a little over 2 weeks ago. Mr. Cross is the senior British Trade Commissioner. Several Montreal radio stations have already announced the death of Mr. Cross, but no official police confirmation has been received yet. At exactly 12:25, or rather at 0:25, by 25 minutes after midnight, the trunk of the car was finally opened and the body of Mr. Laporte was discovered, covered in blood. CKAC, Telemedia, first with the news. We'll be back in a few moments. Oman Maltese, Telemedia, Montreal.
Oh, one blue.
Laporte's body is in this car, found by two journalists, one of whom was Claude Lachance.
And then we called the police, who took about half an hour to get
Holy
here.
shit. Half an
Do you
hour.
expect to discover the body?
Yes. Yes, because knowing the FLQ, they never lied in their communiques. Finding the car with the license number, which they had indicated, it was 90% sure that there was something in it. And it had to be the body of Laporte. We didn't expect to find any dynamite. I was about 100 feet from the car, 75 feet from the car, because the police wouldn't let us come near, especially as there could have been dynamite. We didn't know what was in the trunk. All the police told us was that there was something very heavy in the trunk of the car. And they opened it, and the policeman who opened the trunk, he was from the bomb disposal unit. And they opened the trunk, and they said that there was indeed a man in the trunk. We tried to get closer, but the police wouldn't let us. All we could see was some white clothes with bloodstains on them. And then a few minutes later, the men from the identification squad arrived, and they removed the clothes, and we recognized the body of Laporte. I saw him because when he was taking out of the trunk, I caught a glimpse of his body very, very briefly. He was wearing a sweater, a small sweater, pushed to here. His wrists were wrapped in blood-stained towels. I couldn't see his face, but they told me that his cheeks were very swollen and that he had blood on his nostrils here. on the nose and the mouth. The communique said, I can almost quote it, faced with the arrogance of the federal government and of its lackey Bourassa, the FLQ decided to take action. Mr. Pierre Laporte, Minister of Unemployment and Assimilation, was assassinated this evening at 18 minutes past 6 by the Dieppe cell, and in brackets, the 22nd Regiment. You will find the body in the trunk of a green Chevrolet bearing license number 9J2420. The Front de Libération du Québec, we shall overcome. And there was some indication of where the car was parked, a sort of little sketch of the surrounding area. And a bit lower it was written, warning to all the capitalists in Quebec. How does it go exactly? Let everyone be on his guard, or something like that. I forget the last sentence, but it goes something like this. And from now on, this is the way things are going to be. Now, this very evening, it is clear that the silent revolution is dead. I have the impression that the real revolution is beginning, that some sort of civil war is stirring in Quebec, and that something extremely serious just happened. A lot of stupid things are going to happen from now on. People will perhaps be tempted to kill indiscriminately.
Et je souhaite au peuple canadien de rester uni dans cette épreuve. Et maintenant en anglais, s'il vous plaît. Well, it was shock and consternation, I believe, that all Canadians have learned of the death of Mr. Pierre Laporte, who was so cowardly assassinated by a band of murderers. And I can't help feeling, as a Canadian, a deep sense of shame that this cruel and senseless act should have been conceived in cold blood and executed in like manner. And I want to express to Mrs. Laporte and to Mr. Laporte's family the very deep regrets of the Canadian people, of the Canadian government, and our desire as Canadians to stick together in this very sorry moment of our history. What can you tell us, Mr. Mamas, about the kind of people you're dealing with? I can't tell you anything more. Thank you, Mr. Mamas.
Oh,
Sunday, October the 18th. The sermon is given by Laporte's old friend, the mayor of Montreal, Jean Drapeau.
Is it a warning addressed to all those who hold public office that they will not only be suppressed or assassinated, but that it will be done in the most cruel manner? If there is a lesson that we should accept, if there is a message, and I'm sure that this must have been the last thought of Pierre Laporte, it is that his sacrifice should not have been consented in vain. That all men holding public office should have the courage to continue.
Those responsible for this crime will be found and will be dealt with in the calm and dispassionate atmosphere of Canadian courts. The FLQ has sown the seeds of its own destruction. It has revealed that it has no mandate but terror, no policies but violence, and no solutions but murder.
If you could emphasize that part of the press, that we're not making it public. It's not a time for defenders.
Well, I'll follow your questions.
What I'd rather you did.
No, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, do a 60 for me.
How long do you want to?
I want a 60 seconds.
No, honestly, I can't do that. No.
How long?
Well, I don't know, but if you want 60 seconds, get it from somebody else. I don't want airtime. I couldn't care less about goddamn airtime.
No, it's not airtime.
I'm not going to distort things.
No, don't distort.
The hell with them.
Okay, all right.
This thing is no.
No, we'll do it your way. Do it your way.
This thing is. Look, God damn it, we're not a soap opera.
I know
And
that.
we're not a soap advertisement. If you want that, get it somewhere else.
No, we're not looking for that.
Well, you
You
are
ready,
with
Bob?
60 seconds.
Well,
The guy dies. Our opinion, oh shit.
yeah, go ahead. Hey, you running? Could you express your view and that which you have expressed already today for us, please?
Yes. Well, basically, speaking for the Parti Québécois, but also in conjunction with people from the unions, the CNTU, the FTQ, and the teachers' union, and also with individuals like Mr. Claude Ryan of Le Devoir and others. We agreed on some basic positions. First of all, that, as everybody knows, we find something completely intolerable in Mr. Laporte's barbaric execution by people who have no sense of humanity, who don't reflect Quebec. We have our share of terrorists, active or potential, as every civilized society has, but they don't reflect Quebec. If they did really reflect anything valid in Quebec, I'd get away from here so fast I would never come back. On the other hand, there's also this fact that the government in Quebec and in Ottawa have been using this hard line of la raison d'etat, the decision of not negotiating. They have a share of responsibility. They've already ended up with the death of one of the two hostages. So we hope to God, and we repeat it, we said it a few times before in the groups that we form, and we have nothing political in this. I don't know if anybody wins or loses in this damn thing. I know everybody loses something. We just want to insist again that this line, this rigid line, we think was wrong. We know they believed in Ottawa when they dictated it, that it was right, but I think they've proved now, at least they should have proved it, from a human point of view, from something very much more essential than just clamping down, they were wrong. So we hope to God that they reconsider if need be, and they'll think more now than anything else about saving the one man, Mr. Cross, who apparently is still alive. And again, we ask, with no illusions now, but anyway, that if there's any sense of honor left or can be revived in the guys that were the kidnappers, that for the love of God, they give up. There's no illogic. This is not illogical. The only consistent, clear thing in our attitude over the last few days has been that governments and, at the other end, the extremists find some common ground to save human lives. And whatever happens, we also insist that Quebec, on account of this, there is a blot on Quebec. We all share it. We have to get rid of it. We have to deplore what happened. But on the other hand, let no one think, wherever he is outside Quebec or inside Quebec, that this is enough to make us a sort of cell, a collective cell of repression. We'll fight, if we have to, against anyone who wants to use this climate now to more or less, tie up Quebec in impotence. We're still going to develop, and we hope we take a lesson out of this that makes our society more aware of the price of human life and of making it livable. But that's our responsibility, and no one should think this is an excuse to make Quebec a jail.
It is still not known what happened during Laporte's last week. Now Laporte is dead, and the carefully guarded young Premier Bourassa, the other powers, and the public in huge numbers come to pay their last respects. to the second most powerful politician in Quebec. Monday, October the 19th. The mysterious house where Laporte was held by the Chenier cell of the FLQ, the window through which he apparently tried to escape, the garage which must have concealed Laporte's arrival, the room where Laporte is supposed to have been killed, are found by the police 2 days too late. Laporte's funeral is held on Tuesday, October the 20th. The Church of Notre Dame is surrounded by hundreds of well-armed soldiers. Madame Laporte had asked for a simple funeral, but the ceremony becomes a state occasion. Watched by huge crowds, the powerful show their support for the government. Pierre Laporte came close to being the Prime Minister of Quebec.
Really?
He was the most experienced minister in Bourassa's cabinet. He had been a minister in Lesage's cabinet during La Révolution Tranquille. He had had a long public career in both journalism and politics. He was 49 years old when he died. Why exactly the kidnappers decided to proceed with the killing of Pierre Laporte may never be known. But one thing was clear, that the men in charge of Canada and Quebec were not going to let personal emotions interfere with the running of the country.
Cause of death: acute asphyxiation by strangulation by means of a bond. This bond could be a small chain which Mr. Laporte had around his neck and which was still in place at the time of the postmortem. The marks traced of the strangulation was all around the neck, except at the back of the neck, where it appeared that it had been twisted.
The Liberation Cell of the FLQ sends this photograph of Cross to prove that he is still alive. While the frantic searches continue, a new movement to save Cross's life gets underway. The three major trade unions in Quebec sympathize with the social aims of the FLQ and oppose the War Measures Act. They overcome their long-standing differences and band together, and both the union leaders and the leaders of the Parti Québécois urge the government to give in to the demands of the FLQ to save the life of James Richard Cross. But those in power hold fast as Montreal prepares for a municipal election, an election many felt should have been postponed. The atmosphere is one of confusion, fear, and distrust, which lends itself to the stampeding of frightened voters. Two opposition candidates are arrested under the War Measures Act, and both Mayor Drapeau and Jean Marchand claim incorrectly to have discovered a link between the FLQ and the only serious opposition facing Drapeau, FRAP.
When a movement invites that kind of speaker, and when all the members that are attending the meeting, 3,000 of them apparently, according to the papers, are shouting the letters FLQ, FLQ, I don't think that we need much more evidence to say that there is more than just a moral sympathy.
And when you give these kind of powers to local authorities, you no longer know what use or abuse they're going to make of those powers. This is what troubles us. And you've already had examples of it. You've had an example in the city of Vancouver where the mayor of that city says we can use these powers to clean out the hippies and the draft dodgers. You have a statement by the chief of police in one city on the prairies who said a lot of people that you go on to pick up, this would be a good time to do it. And now the growing suspicion, as pointed out by, for instance, Ron Haggart in the Toronto Telegram last night, that it looks very suspiciously like the regulations and these sweeping orders are going to be used in the province of Quebec. On the one hand, to clean out FRAP, which is opposing Mayor Drapeau, and then the other hand, to get rid of the separatists who have incurred, of course, the displeasure of both Mr. Choquette, the Attorney General, and Mr. Marchand. No, we have no interest in the Montreal election. This is up to the citizens of Montreal to choose their councillors and their mayor, and we don't want to intervene at all in this.
But the fact is, you have already intervened, sir, by what you said.
No, I didn't say that all members of the FRAP organization are members of the FLQ or anything of the kind. I just said that the FRAP, as a body, took a position which gave some kind of a moral guarantee to the FLQ, that's all. But when I said that it was a front, I think it went too far, and this is the only thing I want to correct. As far as the rest is concerned, well, let's wait after the municipal election. And
what organization was going to create chaos in and around the Montreal election bombing?
Well, these are the things that we're going to clarify, I hope, in a few days. This is an attempt to stampede the voters by a smear tactic, guilt by association. You take an organization and you, without any advancing any proof, without producing any evidence, you damn it by aligning it in the public mind with an organization that has just been declared by order in council to be an illegal organization.
To no one's surprise, Drapeau wins easily, winning every one of the 52 seats.
Merci à ceux qui ont permis.
Thank you to all those who, with their votes, have prevented democracy from suffering yet another, even more serious blow. I also wish to thank all those in the provincial and federal governments who understood that our system of government, for which so many of our people gave their lives in battles overseas, was in danger here. And who came forward to help this regime resist not only the known revolutionary attacks, but also the attempts to constitute a provisional government which would preside over the change from constitutional power to revolutionary power.
Few people realized that Drapeau meant that there was a plot to overthrow the government of Quebec and replace it with a provisional government. Drapeau's far-fetched accusation is angrily denied by the prominent people implicated, including editor Claude Ryan, and the whole affair is buried by Bourassa.
I give you the reasons why I have to act to avoid more troubles. There is no question of provisional government being involved in my decision. I was told about that, about the possibility of such a thing, but I did not take that very seriously.
By now, the several police forces have managed to figure out the names of most of the kidnappers, and their descriptions and pictures are papered across Quebec. Bernard Lortie was the first Laporte suspect captured. Lortie was caught here on Queen Mary Road. But Paul and Jacques Rose and Francis Simard managed to escape by hiding in a cupboard behind a false wall while the police searched the apartment. As the weeks passed, a few people in English Canada finally began to protest the loss of civil liberties and to question the need for the War Measures Act.
It's a direct attack upon liberty. It's a direct attack on freedom.
But the vast majority of the population continues to support the Prime Minister and his government's actions. The few people who do oppose the War Measures Act are far from popular.
And you with your publicity have nothing to do. Canada, land of freedom, freedom or
For the hundreds who are imprisoned here in Montreal's Parthenay jail, Canada is indeed a land of forts. Montreal's original Thursday night request is defended by Drapeau.
The public order was very much in danger. And on that Thursday morning, we were really upset. And had it not been with the arrival of the army, the Canadian army, to reassure the population, and we know now how unanimous the population is about the presence here of our Canadian army, well, it would have been the open revolution.
Every country that has had its freedoms and liberties curtailed has been told in advance that this was being done for their protection and it was only on a temporary basis. My position has to be that unless I can get convincing evidence that the government is faced with an insurrection, then I am naturally not going to accede willingly to surrendering the basic freedoms of the people of this country.
The government failed to provide any more evidence, convincing or otherwise. Early in December, a trail of clues leads to northern Montreal. The soldiers throw a huge cordon around the suspected street, and the world knows that at last Cross has been located. The liberation cell of the FLQ negotiates with the authorities, claiming that they are well armed and that they have a huge quantity of dynamite. After several nervous hours, the authorities agree to fly the kidnappers and their families to Cuba in exchange for the life of the man who has been held captive in this duplex, James Richard Cross.
We backed out into the street. Carbon was so excited he scraped the side of the car against the wall, had to go back in again, come out again. And there we were out in the sunlight, which I now saw for the first time in 60 days. We're in on the most terrifying ride through the streets of Montreal, surrounded by police, and I was really afraid we were going to have an accident because the door of the car wasn't very secure. Langto was trying to hang on to it, and I was trying to hang on to him because I was afraid if we had an accident, there was dynamite in the car, we'd all blow up.
Hidden by the newspapers are Cross, the negotiator, lawyer Murdler, and Langto, Carbonneau, and Langlois of the FLQ. A tired but happy Cross waits in the Canadian pavilion, chatting with relieved politicians. This aeroplane has been ready since before Laporte was killed. Cross's kidnappers, some members of their families, and an old television set are flown to Cuba, and then Cross is freed. Marc Carbonneau, Yves Langlois, Jacques Cosset-Trudel, and Jacques Langto are all now said to be living in Cuba.
Really?
And James Richard Cross is reunited with his family in England. As the year of 1970 comes to a close, this house near Saint-Luc, 20 miles from Montreal, becomes the scene of the last drama. At the end of a tunnel in a cave were Paul and Jacques Rose and Francis Simard. Trapped by the police, they quickly gave themselves up, asking only that the people still detained under the War Measures Act be released on bail. Bernard Lorty, Francis Simard, Jacques Rose, and Paul Rose will battle with a legal system which, they claim, is imposed, foreign, and without jurisdiction in their country, Quebec. For Canada, the arrests, the kidnappings, the killing, and the removal of civil liberties have come as a sad and costly loss of innocence. there will be a referendum in Quebec, I'm happy. I'm happy with that. I'm not scared.
10 years ago, millions of Canadians were caught in the clash of two very different dreams. Over the next 2 nights, a dramatic story of one of the most intense events in Canada's history. It's the story of a prime minister who thought he couldn't lose.
I have the best product to offer. Canada.
Of two separatist leaders who staked it all to win. It's a story of political infighting and bruised egos, of uneasy alliances and breathtaking gambles. 10 years ago, Quebec was on the verge of becoming a country. 10 years ago, Canada reached the breaking point.
We intend to make of Quebec a sovereign nation. I think we'll have a country pretty soon. Acceptez-vous que le Québec?
The real question.
It's a reflection of lack of political courage.
I say sovereign Quebec, we have wasted too much money.
Seul le Québec dans le Canada.
Build this great country. C'est un pays.
Divorce today and lovers tomorrow. We are taking a very dangerous game.
Separate Quebec would be a foreign country. Period.
Vive le Canada!
C'est vrai qu'on a été battu. Vous savez que c'est nous. L'argent est rock'n'roll.
It's a small world, sometimes too small. Jacques Parizeau and Jean Chrétien meet socially for the first time at a Mexican resort during the 1969 Christmas holidays. The wives of the two political opponents make them promise not to talk politics. They agree. A truce is called. Until the day Parizeau boasts that he had studied at the famous London School of Economics and that Chrétien had not. A chill sets in, and the two men avoid each other for the rest of the holiday. It's not surprising, for it's hard to imagine two men more different from each other than Jean Chrétien and Jacques Parizeau. Jean Chrétien is born into a working-class family in rural Quebec and will have to scrabble for everything he will ever achieve in life. He wants to become an architect, but when he's still in his teens, his father steers him into politics. He will take to that rough-and-tumble world like a fish to water.
At 13, I was distributing pamphlets and putting the posters on the walls and placing the chairs in the city hall, for the meetings and so on. 15, I was debating with him politics in the poor room next door.
Of February of 1969, a tremendous blast occurred at the building across from here, the Montreal Stock Exchange. When we entered the place, there were people crying and running all over, and tons of rubber with a white dust that it looked like there's snowstorm. It was a horrible scene. This year we have had simultaneous explosions, 3 explosions at the same moment in August. And also for the first time we've had bombs in public places such as the metro stations, which was never seen before. My job was to dismantle a bomb, make a report. That was it. You see, I had accepted a rather unusual job. I had to do it right to the end.
became a policeman in May of 1959. My first assignment was Point St. Charles, my native district. I spent 4 very good, nice years in Point St. Charles, and I was ready to spend much more time there.
Fucking
The
nifty.
fall of 62, there was a new phenomenon in Montreal, violent demonstrations. This was unheard of in Montreal. We used to go on the street twice a year, Saint Jean Baptiste and Santa Claus Parade. All of a sudden, you have a group of students who are demonstrating against the president of CN, who said that when he was asked why there was no French Canadian on his board of administrators, he says, "When I find a competent one, I will name one on my board," and that made the news. You see. When bombs started to be found in cities, the city and the police department decided to create a real bomb squad. All of a sudden, I was on loan to what we called at the time the mobile laboratory. My first day with the bomb squad was May the 17th of 1963, Black Friday, when 10 bombs were deposited in as many mailboxes in the night in Westmount.
Oh, what the
A
fuck?
typical SLQ
Oh, it's supposed to be.
bomb looked like this. You got 2 5-pound each of dynamite, 10 pounds, a clock. The minute the clock, the bell will ring, the key will unwind. As it unwinds, it will touch the contact. That's it. One fatal bombing took place not far from here, 5th of May of 1966, in a shoe factory that was hiring scabs. Their objective was much different from hitting government symbols. They went to big business, capitalism. 5 minutes before 1 o'clock in the afternoon, during lunch hour, 2 young kids drove a motorcycle. The one in the back seat had a shoebox. They said it was a shoe factory, and told the lady, "Someone will call you about that." So Madame Morin took the package, and she was blown to bits.
I was then driven for approximately 20 minutes and taken out of the car in the garage, led upstairs into a room where I spent the next 60 days.
It was very, very likely that Mr. Cross was in a certain house. So I was asked to go there.
Police were watching it until the early hours of the morning when the kidnappers, conscious that police were onto them, transmitted a message via a pipe which was thrown out a second-floor window.
There's a piece of pipe.
Wait. 20 minutes and
Morin took the package, and she was blown to bits.
We're growing shoe factory killed Secretary Therese Morin and injured 3 others. Fuck. Yo, they're just fucking. Soldiers shredded. FLQ bombings continued in Montreal until 1970. When the FLQ adopted a new tactic. Political kidnapping.
I was then driven for approximately 20 minutes and taken out of the car in the garage, led upstairs into a room where I spent the next 60 days.
It was very, very likely that Mr. Cross was in a certain house. So I was asked to go there.
Police were watching it until the early hours of the morning when the kidnappers, conscious that police were onto them, transmitted a message via a pipe which was thrown out a second floor window.
The piece of pipe had been thrown. The call was relayed to me, but I had an unmarked station wagon. So I had a bulletproof vest, and I pick up the piece of pipe, and there's a paper in it. So with a pair of tweezers, I pull the paper. That's it. It says, if you attempt anything, gas, guns, etc., Mr. Cross will be the first to die. We have lots of dynamite.
I can never find these folks you want to say for coffee, please. From my breeze, Expo 67 declared cheap territory, so. What? Wait.
Cross will be the first to die. We have. I pull the paper.
Operation Liberation.
It says if
they have their own stationery in front der
if you attempt anything, get gas, guns, etc., Mr. Cross will be the first to die. We have lots of dynamite.
What?
Then in the same car that brought Cross to the duplex on October the 5th.
Wait. Expo 67. What the fuck is Expo 67? Yeah, the big dome thing. Back out. I have a. That can't even be real. big ass dome. Oh. Right? Gigi, come inside. Oh no. Ah. Bruh. Where is your sister? Mama. Mama. There's someone over there. Where's your sister? Mama. Cameron? Well, hey. Expo's 1967 International and Universal Expedition, commonly known as the General Expedition, Category 1, World's Fair held... What? World's Fair? With the most attendees and 62 nations participating. It also is set the single day attendance record for World Fair, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Canadians' main celebrating its centennial year, the fair had been intended to be held in Moscow to help the Soviet Union celebrate Russia's revolutionary 50th anniversary. However, various reasons Soviets decided to cancel, and Canada was awarded in late 16... Not well supported at first. Today, the islands that hosted the World Exhibition mainly park and recreational use with only a few structures. I've been in this building, I'm pretty sure. Oh, this is so boring. Blah, blah, blah. Lobby Canadian government to try again for the fair, which they did. Blah, 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 blah. It was the second best BIE sanctioned World Expedition 1900. Expedition Universe. That's my fucking garlic stick. You just licked the crap out of my fucking breadstick. Osaka and Shanghai. Several sites were proposed for main expo runs. One location was considered Memorial Park to the north of the downtown core, but it was Drapeau's idea to create the new island in the St. Lawrence River to enlarge existing St. Helens Island. What the fuck is St. Helens Island? Saint Helene. Forms part of Hochelaga. What? Archipelago? What? Archipelago. The Lemoyne Canal separates it from Notre Dame Island. St. Helens Island and Notre Dame Island together make up Parc Jean Drapeau, formerly known as Parc de Isle. Named in 1611, Samuel Champlain to honor his wife Helen, blah blah blah. This island belonged to the Lemoyne family of Longueuil. From 1665 to 1818, it was purchased by the British government. Purchased? A Fort St. Helens powerhouse blockhouses were built on the island as defense for the city. Oh, the observatory. In the 1940s, World War II, St. Helens Island, along with various other regions of Canada, such as Lac St. Jean and Hull, Quebec, had prisoner of war camps. Okay, this is all just because of the fucking Expo bullshit. Internment camps, military prisons. Oh. Koreans? Okay. We're staying on prison. Oh wow, was number 47 and remained unnamed like most of Canada's other war prisons. The prisoners of war were POWs. Were sorted and classified in categories including nationality, civilian, or military status. In this camp, POWs were mostly of Italian and German nationality. Those were a bunch of Koreans. Also, prisoners were forced into hard labor, which literally your link said that they were Korean. Yeah, destroyed because of the treatment of prisoners. Yeah. Terre de Hum, in preparation for Expo 67, greatly enlarged and consolidated with several nearby islands using excavated earth. Yeah, I knew that. The island is made from the metro or dirt. I don't know how that works. Man and His World, or Terre de Hum. Several important attractions are found on the island, including St. Helens Fort, the World Amusement Park, the Biosphere. That's where I went. The aquatic complex includes exterior pools. The park is primarily recreational. Site for Montrealers. What? Really? But How does that have to do with anything? Magnetic territory. Show? Man, you guys love hiding shit. Museums. Wait, Political rare. I don't get it. Damn. Grand Prix. Okay. Oh. Huh. I don't get it. Surrounding this place has also prevented land. Huh. Oh my god. What a shit show. That better not be my fucking cat. Where are you? Mama? Lindsay! Montebello? Habitat 67. Housing. What? Writes how deeply moved she was. Flying for the first time by night alone over Argentina. Happened to notice she was flickeringly scattered across the plate. He twinkled here and there, alone like stars. In truth, being made aware of our own solitude can give us insight into solitude of others. It can cause us to gravitate knows and distress without any human need for solidarity. Huh. He found a phrase to express his anguish and hopes that was simple as it was rich in meaning, and because that phrase was chosen many years later, wow, that's so sad. Really? Problems. Despite success to Holland's front deliberations in Quebec. Big fucking surprise. Militants have threatened to disrupt the exhibition, but were inactive during this period. Vietnam War protesters picketed during the opening day. American President Lyndon Johnson became a focus of war protesters. Threats that Cuba Pavilion would be destroyed by anti-Castro forces were not carried out. In June, the Arab-Israeli conflict in the Middle East flared up again in a 6-day war, which resulted in Kuwait pulling out of the fair in protest of the Western nations. Dealt with war, the President of France, Charles de Gaulle, caused an international incident to address thousands of Montreal City Hall by yelling, oh, oh no. By yelling thousands at Montreal City Hall by yelling out in now's infamous words, Vive Montreal, Vive le Quebec, Vive le Quebec Libre. In September, the most serious problem turned out to be a 30-day transit strike. By the end of July, estimates predicted that the expo would exceed 60 million visitors, but the strike cut deeply into attendance and revenue figures. Just for conclusion, another major problem is guest accommodation and lodging. Lodge Expo was created to direct visitors accommodations in the Montreal area, which usually meant visitors staying at home people. Oh yeah. Oh dear. Unfamiliar with traditional hotels or motels. Populace opened up their homes to thousands of guests. Unfortunately, some visitors were sometimes sent to less respectable establishments where operators took full advantage of the tourist trade. Management of Lodge Expo was refused to Expo and managed by Quebec. Provincial authorities still Expo would get most of the blame for directing visitors to the establishment, but overall a visit to Expo Montreal was still seen as a bargain. Expo ends. Blah 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 blah. A fair had been scheduled to close 2 days earlier, however, a 2-day extension granted by the Bureau of International Acquisitions allowed it to continue over the weekend. On the final day, 221,554 visitors, added to more than 50 million that attended Expo 67. What? At the time, Canada's population was only 20 million. How is that possible? What the fuck? I've heard of this Habitat 67. What is that? Oh, yeah! Model Community Housing Complex. Israeli Canadian. Originally conceived, seats collected regular university, X%. Yeah! Where is this? A guild to put on the McCoy next to the St. Lawrence River, Hunter School, to say Oxford and the landmark. That's it. Interesting. Oh. Wait, what? The Olympics. Ironically, 1976. Around that time. The fire destroyed the acrylic outer skin of the dome. Really? Must have been like 6 on light here. 5 or 6. You're so super, don't get it. Oh, cool. I still don't get what that has to do with it. Fuck off.
Then, in the same car that brought Cross to the duplex on October the 5th, the British diplomat, the lawyer, and the kidnappers leave under heavy escort for the Expo rendezvous.
But we also informed that there would be 2 bombs in the car, consisting each of 5 pounds of dynamite with a spring-loaded switch. That's called a dead man switch. If he gets shot, if he died, boom.
And we backed out into the street, and there we were out in the sunlight, which I now saw for the first time in 60 days. We then had the most terrifying ride through the streets of Montreal, surrounded by police, streets lined with troops, police,
This is the cavalcade traveling between 40 and 50 miles an hour, arriving from Dockside, Montreal side, at the Man and His Word entrance. As you can see, they're going at a good clip.
Originally, there were just two policemen on the scene. The commander of the police station and his driver. Luckily, the driver was a former member of the bomb squad. So when the terrorists arrived on the scene, he indicated that the two bombs were incomplete. There was no detonator.
Later tonight, Quebec Premier Robert Bourassa went in to visit Mr. Cross and also had a conversation with him.
Premier Bourassa paid a visit to Mr. Cross. So as he left the pavilion, instead of going to his limousine, he went to us. He says, today, gentlemen, your work was more important than what we politicians have done. And I thank you for it. So our October crisis ended with the congratulations and thanks from the premier. Not too bad. My job was to dismantle a bomb, make a report, precisely in view of testifying one day in court. That was it. You see, I had accepted a rather unusual job. I contributed to public security. Our challenge was to keep danger to the minimum. See, by arresting people so that they won't put more bombs. I was a policeman. That's it.
Guns around here. Haven't you noticed? Yeah, I've noticed them. I worry you people decided to have them. What's your worry? I'm not worried, but you seem to not worried. What's your? I know where I'm worried about living in a town that's full of people with guns running around in it. Are you? Have done anything to you? Have they pushed you around or anything? They pushed around friends of mine. Yeah. What were your friends doing? Trying to take pictures of them. Aha. Is that against the law? No, not at all. Well, doesn't it worry you having a town that you've got to resort to this kind of thing? No, it doesn't worry me. I think it's natural that if people are being abducted, that they be protected against such abduction. What would you do if a Quebec minister, another Quebec minister were abducted, or a federal minister? Well, but isn't that one of the? Is your position that you should give in to the 7 demands of the FMQ? And not at all. My position is completely the opposite. What is your position? My position is that you don't give in to any of them. All right. But you don't protect yourselves against the possibility of blackmail. Well, how can you protect everybody that is going to be a possible target without a much bigger military force, without putting somebody on everybody in the country, turning it into almost a police state? So what do you suggest? That we protect nobody? How can you protect them all? Well, you can't protect them all, but I'm therefore arguing that you shouldn't protect any. Oh, that's right. That's your position. Right. All right. So Pierre Laporte wasn't protected and he was abducted. If you had hindsight, would you not have preferred to protect him and Mr. Cross? Well, it's second guessing. It's pretty easy, but you can't do it. But I'm asking you to first guess now. No, because it's impossible. It would have been impossible to protect cabinet ministers of the provincial government or diplomats? I would suspect so. With all the diplomats there are in this country? Well, we got a big army. You're going to use it up pretty fast at this rate. What do you mean at this rate? What, 6 and 7? I can interpolate something here. You seem to be thinking this in your statement in the House this morning. You seem to be saying that you thought the press had been less than responsible in its coverage of the story so far. Could you elaborate on that? No, this is less than responsible. I was suggesting that I should perhaps use a bit more restraint, which you're not doing now. You're going to make a big news item of this, I'm sure.
Well, the paper's
You know,
is a big news item.
Yeah, but the main thing that the FLQ is trying to gain from this is a hell of a lot of publicity for the movement. And I'm suggesting that the more recognition you give to them, the greater their victory is. And I'm not interested in giving them a victory. But
Well, there's surely a proposition that perhaps it is would be wise to use less inflammatory terms than bandits when you talk about a bunch of people who have the lives of two men in their hands.
You don't think they're bandits?
Well, regardless of what I don't think I'd be inclined to wave a red flag in their face if they held two of my friends or colleagues with guns at their heads.
Well, first of all, I didn't call them bandits. I call the people who were in jail now bandits, who've been tried before the law and condemned to a prison term. And I said that you people should stop calling them political prisoners. They're not political prisoners. They're outlaws. They're criminal prisoners. They're not political prisoners. And they're bandits. That's why they're in jail.
But with your army troops, you seem to be combating them as almost as though it is a war. And if it is a war, is anything that they say have validity?
Don't be silly. We're not combating them as a war, but we're using some of the army as peace agents in order that the police be more free to do their job as policemen and not spend their time guarding your friends against some form of kidnapping.
But you said earlier that you protect them in this way, but you have said before that this kind of violence, what you're fighting here, the kind of violence of the FLQ, can lead to a police state.
Sure, that's what you're complaining about, isn't it?
Well, yes, but surely that decision is yours, not the FLQ's.
Yeah, but I've asked you what your own logic is. It's to let them abduct anybody, not give any protection to anyone, call off the police. So that seems to be your position.
Not call off the police. Surely the police's job is to catch people who break the law.
Yeah, but not to give protection to those citizens who might be blackmailed for one reason or another.
Which must be half the population of the country in one way or another.
No.
I explain it badly, I think, but what you're talking about, to me, is choices. And my choice is to live in a society that is free and democratic, which means that you don't have people with guns running around in it.
All right, then.
And one of the things I have to give up for that choice is the fact that people like you
kidnapping politicians and fucking murdering them.
Sure.
Sir, if you had to right now,
but this isn't my choice, obviously. You know, I think it's more important to get rid of those who are committing violence against the total society and those who are trying to run the government through a parallel power by establishing their authority by kidnapping and blackmail. And I think it's our duty as a government to protect government officials and important people in our society against being used as tools in this blackmail. No, you don't agree to this, but I'm sure that, once again, with hindsight, you would have probably found it preferable if Mr. Cross and Mr. Laporte had been protected from kidnapping, which they weren't, because the steps we're taking now weren't taken. But even with your hindsight, I don't see how you can deny that.
No, I still go back to the choice that you have to make in the kind of society that you have.
There's a lot of bleeding hearts around who just don't like to see people with helmets and guns. All I can say is go on and bleed. But it's more important to keep law and order in this society than to be worried about weak-kneed people who don't like the looks of a soldier.
At any cost? At any cost? How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that?
Well, just watch me.
At reducing civil liberties? To that extent?
To what extent?
Well, if you extend this and you say, okay, you're going to do anything to protect them, this include wiretapping, reducing other civil liberties in some ways?
Yes, I think the society must take every means at its disposal to defend itself against the emergence of a parallel power which defies the elected power in this country. And I think that goes to any distance. So long as there's a power in here which is challenging the elected representative of the people, I think that power must be stopped. And I think it's only, I repeat, weak-kneed, bleeding hearts who are afraid to take these measures.
Excuse me, sir, you have been largely silent on this whole case, and understandably so. If you had anything to address to the abductors at this point, what would it be?
I think Mr. Boisson stated the position yesterday, and I repeated in the House, with which we agree completely. There's only one thing now that we're prepared to talk to them about. It's the way in which Mr. Cross and Mr. Laporte can be effectively released. This mechanism has to be dealt with first and foremost. I see you're playing devil's advocate. No, I'm not. You really mean these. I really do.
It is such a moment in Cuba. People wait for it, are drawn to it, listen to every step of it on national radio. 2.5 million people, that's more than 20% of the entire country, coming out annually to run in remembrance of a hero. Not theirs, ours. Terry Fox. There is no bigger Terry Fox run outside Canada than the one in Cuba. A little social solidarity among friends, a relationship built long ago. What is this thing, though, that Canada and Cuba have? They seem to have been flirting with each other for quite some time.
I think flirting is a very good word.
John Kirk, a Canadian who's a scholar on Cuba, was an admitted fan of Fidel Castro and talks of the Canada-Cuba rapport as one of chemistry.
So we were flirting with each other, and John Diefenbach, a populist from the prairies, decided.
Oh.
The National Revenue Building, the RCMP headquarters, the Canadian National Railways, the Black Watch Armory, the Royal Canadian
Lag.
with any of its eloquent aims and angers. For these reasons, it is a key to the crisis.
Front de Libération du Québec. Manifeste.
The FLQ Manifesto.
No thanks. Thanks, but no thanks. Ça fonctionne pas là, maybe?
We were looking for an isolated house in an area where the neighbors weren't too nosy. We were going to use it as our base of operations.
Yo, are you fucking Russian?
In the spring of 1970, the FLQ is getting ready to strike again. Lise Basset and Paul Rose rent a very ordinary little house south of Montreal. We showed up as a couple, Paul and Lise Blais. We were looking for an isolated house in an area where the neighbors weren't too nosy. We were going to use it as our base of operations. The country will be plunged into its worst crisis since the Second World War. It begins in early October. The FLQ kidnaps British diplomat James Cross from his house in Montreal. The kidnappers threaten to kill Cross unless the government releases 23 prison inmates they describe as political prisoners.
I said that you people should stop calling them political prisoners. They're not political prisoners. They're outlaws. They're criminal prisoners. They're not political prisoners. And they're bandits. That's why they're in jail.
5 days later, another blow. The cell led by Paul Rose kidnaps Quebec's Minister of Labour, Pierre Laporte. now there's a real sense of crisis. The FLQ seems well organized. The police forces powerless. Laporte is detained in the little house Lise Balsay and Paul Rose rented a few months before.
La station radiophonique CKAC de Montréal vient de recevoir un troisième communiqué émis par le Fonds de libération du Québec, particulièrement par la cellule de financement Chénier. Donc, un communiqué accompagné d'une lettre adressée de la main de M. Pierre Laporte, adressée à M. Bourassa.
The kidnapping puts tremendous pressure on the young Quebec premier. Pierre Laporte is his senior cabinet minister. Bourassa turns to Ottawa for help. The federal government sends in the army to protect politicians and important buildings. Canada has never seen anything like this before. For Pierre Trudeau, a lifelong champion of individual rights, this is a defining moment.
So what is it with all these men with guns around here? Well, there's a lot of bleeding hearts around who just don't like to see people with helmets and guns. All I can say is go on and bleed, but it's more important to keep law and order in this society than to be worried about weak-kneed people who don't like the looks of a soldier. At any cost? At any cost? How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that? Oh, just watch me.
The FLQ has support. 3,000 people crowd into the Paul Sauvé arena. The FLQ's lawyer, Robert Lemieux, fires them up.
On va s'organiser intelligemment, on va choisir nos terrains et nous vaincrons!
Bourassa and Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau now believe they are facing an apprehended insurrection. They ask the federal government to act immediately.
The government, following an analysis of the facts, including the requests of the government of Quebec and of the city of Montreal for urgent action, decided to proclaim the War Measures Act. It did so at 4 a.m. this morning in order to permit the full weight of government to be brought quickly to bear on all those persons advocating or practicing violence as a means of achieving political ends.
This law has never been invoked in peacetime. It suspends basic civil rights and liberties. It allows police searches and arrests without warrants, and prolonged detentions without charges and without the right to see a lawyer. Hundreds of raids and arrests begin immediately. In the middle of the night, police show up at the home of singer Pauline Julien.
They didn't ask us anything. I refused to stay in the living room during their search. I told them, "You are in my house. I'm going with you everywhere." They didn't behave that badly. They weren't as brutal as I had heard they were elsewhere.
She and her companion, leftist journalist Gérald Godin, are arrested.
Why was I in jail? If only they had questioned me, I might have had an inkling. What had I said? What had I written or published?
Pauline Julien and many other women are locked up in Montreal's Tonguay prison. All contact with the outside world is forbidden. A warden offers some help.
She told us, "I can make phone calls for you, but I can't say who I am, nor where you are. All I can do is ask those people whose name you give me to take care of your cats or your children."
Only Tommy Douglas and his New Democratic Party openly oppose the War Measures Act.
And when you give these kind of powers to local authorities, you no longer know what use or abuse they're going to make of those powers. This is what troubles us.
But during the early days, Canadians overwhelmingly support the federal government, even in Quebec, where almost all of the arrests occur. On the night of October 17th, an FLQ communique leads police to a car
parked near Saint-Hubert Airport.
The 13-day drama that Canadians have been living is over. The Minister of Labour and Immigration of the province of Quebec, Pierre Laporte, was found dead tonight in the trunk of a car found near St. Hubert Airport.
It is the first assassination of a Canadian politician since the murder of Thomas D'Arcy McGee 102 years earlier. Lise Balset did not take part in the kidnappings. She is in the lower St. Lawrence region when she and a group of FLQ sympathizers are arrested.
The radio was on, and somewhere between Matane and Quebec City, I heard the bulletin that they had found Pierre Laporte's body. I felt bad and, at the same time, a bit weird. At that time, we were revolutionaries, so for me, Laporte's death was an execution, not a murder.
Tuesday, October 20th is one of the darkest days in Montreal's long history. In less than 3 weeks, a whole political culture has changed. Until then, politicians in Canada went about with no protection. Now they become less accessible. There will be a greater distance between the elected and the governed. Pierre Laporte's killers are arrested a few months later. The police will find and free James Cross after 60 days of captivity. It is the end of the FLQ. Pauline Julien and Gérald Gaudin are detained for 8 days, then released without charge. It will be the same for more than 440 others. Pierre Trudeau and Robert Bourassa will express no regret for having invoked the War Measures Act. But later, they will concede that there were excesses.
That was very vague. Short fucking lived. Interesting.
Paul Rose, c'est maintenant le 10e anniversaire de la crise d'octobre. Qu'est-ce que vous vouliez obtenir lorsque vous avez déclenché ces événements il y a 10 ans?
Ah, il faut dire qu'à l'époque, les moyens démocratiques étaient bloqués. C'est-à-dire qu'il y avait le règlement anti-manifestation de drapeaux. Il y avait aussi eu le coup de la Brinks, qui avait entravé le processus électoral. Et puis, il y avait eu aussi, il y avait régulièrement le saccage des comités citoyens, qui étaient, le milieu de travail, avec pignon sur rue, de politisation, de conscientisation. Or, ces processus démocratiques-là étant bloqués, nous, à un moment donné, on en est arrivé à la conclusion qu'il fallait passer à autre chose. Et puis ça, pour répondre exactement à votre question, notre but n'était pas de prendre le pouvoir comme on le laisse entendre.
C'était quoi? C'était pas de faire un coup d'État?
Non, un coup d'État, d'ailleurs, on était assez politiquement contre. On laisse ça aux militaires et puis à l'armée canadienne. Mais pour nous, c'était de simplement sensibiliser l'opinion publique à la question de la libération du Québec, qui était bloquée à ce moment-là.
Paul Rose, en 1970, est-ce que vous aviez prévu que Pierre Elliott Trudeau ne céderait pas à vos demandes?
D'abord, en termes de prévision, on n'avait pas prévu les mesures de guerre. Ça, c'était une chose.
Vous n'aviez pas prévu ça?
Non, on ne connaissait même pas l'existence de cette loi archaïque-là, qui date des années 1914, la première guerre. On n'était pas au courant de ça.
Et vous le saviez assez déterminé, vous saviez que le chef du gouvernement à ce moment-là était assez déterminé. Pensiez-vous qu'il était pour libérer les prisonniers politiques, accéder à vos demandes?
En termes à l'intérieur, on ne savait pas exactement. Ce qui nous intéressait, c'est vrai qu'il y avait la libération des prisonniers politiques pour nous autres.
Vous aviez prévu que...
On laisse ça aux militaires et puis à l'armée canadienne. Mais pour nous, c'était de simplement sensibiliser l'opinion publique.
Il y a 10 ans.
Il faut dire qu'à l'époque, les moyens démocratiques...
Paul Rose, c'est maintenant le 10e anniversaire de la crise d'octobre. Qu'est-ce que vous vouliez obtenir lorsque vous avez déclenché ces événements il y a 10 ans?
Il faut dire qu'à l'époque, les moyens démocratiques étaient bloqués. C'est-à-dire qu'il y avait le règlement anti-manifestation de drapeaux. Il y avait aussi eu le coup de la braise qui avait entravé son processus électoral. Et puis, il y avait eu aussi, il y avait régulièrement le saccage des comités citoyens, qui étaient, qui étaient le milieu de travail avec pignon sur rue, de politisation, de conscientisation. Or, ces processus démocratiques-là étant bloqués, nous, à un moment donné, on en est arrivé à la conclusion qu'il fallait passer à autre chose. Et puis ça, pour répondre exactement à votre question, notre but n'était pas de prendre le pouvoir comme on le laissait entendre.
C'était quoi? C'était pas de faire un coup d'État?
Non, un coup d'État, d'ailleurs, on était assez politiquement contre. On laisse ça aux militaires et puis à l'armée canadienne. Mais pour nous, c'était de simplement sensibiliser l'opinion publique à la question de la libération du Québec, qui était bloquée à ce moment-là.
Paul Rose, en 1970, est-ce que vous aviez prévu que Pierre Elliott Trudeau ne céderait pas à vos demandes?
D'abord, en termes de prévision, on n'avait pas prévu les mesures de guerre. Ça, c'était une chose.
Vous n'aviez pas prévu ça?
Non, on ne connaissait même pas l'existence de cette loi archaïque-là, qui date des années 1914, la première guerre. On n'était pas au courant de ça.
Mais vous le saviez assez déterminé, vous saviez que le chef du gouvernement à ce moment-là était assez déterminé. Pensiez-vous qu'il était pour libérer les prisonniers politiques, accéder à vos demandes?
En termes à l'intérieur, on ne savait pas exactement.
Talk about fucking leading. Something doesn't seem right there.
Was a day of rapid developments here in Montreal, 20 minutes before the last deadline for fulfillment of ransom demands.
It was unlike anything Quebec or the rest of Canada had ever seen. A series of violent events, bombings, robberies, and kidnappings. Led by the Front de Libération du Québec, a group that started by calling for an independent socialist Quebec state and ended as terrorists. First kidnapping the British Trade Commissioner James Cross in early October of 1970. 5 days later, the Quebec Minister of Labour, Pierre Laporte, grabbed while playing football on his front lawn. Laporte's 11-year-old son Jean was at a friend's house. Now a 61-year-old man who has lived this crisis like few others, and still today. Laporte found out something was wrong when he turned on the TV.
So basically, they asked me to shut down the TV, but that's how I learned that something has happened at the family. And I'll say probably half an hour later, my sister came to pick me up with a policeman, and they brought me home. And that's when I learned that my father was kidnapped on October the 10th.
His family's life changed quickly and forever. As the FLQ made demands of the government seeking the release of so-called political prisoners. There were calls for the War Measures Act to be invoked, suspending civil rights and allowing arrests and detentions without charges.
The powers include the right to search and arrest without warrant, to detain suspected persons without the necessity of laying specific charges immediately, and to detain persons without bail. These are strong powers, and I find them as distasteful as I am sure you do.
Hundreds of people were rounded up and held in just the first day. The very next day, October 17th, the FLQ directed police to a car in a parking lot. There again, Jean Laporte, the 11-year-old, watched it unfold on TV.
So I was sleeping. On the 18th in the morning, I opened the TV, saw the car, and saw in the trunk the body of my father. And that's how I learned again through TV that my father was dead, that he was killed the day before. My only conclusion, and it's a simple one, is when you're 11 years old and your father is kidnapped and then murdered, is you miss the person.
These are not events Laporte likes to think about. He speaks very rarely about any of it. In a period of 10 days, his father was kidnapped, killed, and buried. But he does have his own conclusions about what happened and why.
And the October crisis, James Cross event, and the kidnapping and murdering of Pierre Laporte changed that through the War Measure Act and with what government have decided to do. I do believe that they made the conscious decision to sacrifice Pierre Laporte in order to put order in the province of Quebec and giving themselves more opportunities to realign what the future should be in our province.
Why do you say that? Why do you think your father was sacrificed?
Because when you're in politics or when you're in power, you have to make decisions and you have to look at your options.
This year, there are calls for official apologies from the federal government for those detained at the time, an idea the current prime minister does not seem keen on entertaining.
There's no question that the events of October 1970 had a difficult impact on many Quebecers. But I think we need to first and foremost remember that this difficult anniversary is going to be particularly painful for the families of Pierre Laporte.
For Jean Laporte, an official apology from the government is not his first priority. This anniversary is about calling on Canadians to remember his father as someone more than a man killed in a moment of violence and national crisis. Pierre Laporte was a journalist for many years, exposing the mistakes of the Duplessis government, a dedicated politician, a great defender of the French language for francophones inside and outside Quebec.
It's important for me to bring Pierre Laporte's career and the fact that I guess a journalist and politician had a fantastic career, that Pierre Laporte is not only a school or a bridge, it's a lot more than that for many Quebecers and Canadians. So thank you.
Laporte doesn't carry anger with him about the murder of his father, but he does recognize the impact on him and his family. The loss of a man which 5 decades later is still so deeply felt. Rosemary Barton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, they do marry their children after 14, so. Yeah, no, that's illegal. That should very much you get your kid taken away.
I'm speaking to you at a moment of grave crisis.
Children should not be having children and getting married. Too many fucking dumb people already. This is taking a while. I like how the results are just always different.
"50 years ago this year, Canada experienced one of the most pivotal chapters in our country's history. During the October crisis, a homegrown terror group launched a violent campaign for Quebec's independence. The FLQ kidnapped British Trade Commissioner James Cross in Montreal. Then, Quebec's Minister of Immigration and Labour, Pierre Laporte, was kidnapped and killed. Now, a new CTV W5 investigation taking a deeper look at the October crisis and its lingering impact. And joining us this morning with more is W5's Lloyd Robertson. Good to have you here at Your Morning.
Thank you very much, Amber. I see I've graduated to the couch.
Yes, you have. You were anchoring reporting at the time when these bombings began, 1963. Yeah. Why did they start and why did they escalate to the point that they did?
Well, it really took place at the time of the launch of what they called the Quiet Revolution in Quebec. And that was all about the rallying cry of maître chez nous, masters in our own house. Because Quebec up to that time had been a kind of a closed society, very French, of course, mostly Catholic. So when the Quiet Revolution was launched, the idea was we want to be masters in our own house. We want to seize some of the control from the English business interests and have things our way for a change. And a number of groups emerged at that time, and they were deciding how they would do this. There were the academics and intellectuals like Pierre Trudeau, his colleague Gerard Pelletier, Jean Marchand, and then there was the FLQ, the Front de Libération de Québec. Now, they were influenced by all the things going on in the world at the time. In Latin America, the groups, radical left-wing groups. In the United States, the anti-Vietnam War protests at their peak during that time, the Baader-Meinhof gang in Germany. So they wanted an independent socialist republic in Quebec, totally independent of Canada, and they believed that the way to do that was through violent means, not through the legitimacy of democracy. So they set out to begin that violent campaign. And the bombing started because they wanted to catch attention. They knew that, in the United States, of course, what happened in the 60s with the assassinations of President Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, they knew that the only way they could draw attention was to do something dramatic. So that's why they started bombing.
The fear and the violence all ratcheted up. That brought us to 1970, this time referred to as the October crisis. Remind us why.
Well, the October crisis happened because of the kidnapping of British Trade Commissioner James Cross. No one ever believed that this would happen because at the time the FLQ was regarded as, kind of a ragtag group of would-be terrorists and left-wing zealots, not really serious, but then they made themselves very prominent, and the whole issue became very serious with the seizing of the British Trade Commissioner. And he, of course, represented a kind of symbol for them because he was the British Trade Commissioner, the colonial mentality. But another group felt at the same time that, no, this wasn't about seizing the Brits. This was about getting our own people who were collaborating with the enemy, as it were, the French Quebecers who were going along with this colonial mentality. So they grabbed the Quebec Labour Minister, Pierre Laporte.
I remember learning about this time in history and thinking, I can't believe this happened in Canada. It was a terrifying event, serious consequences, fatal results. And then, you saw the country, the War Measures Act, you saw, things happen in this country that people hadn't seen before. You talked to a lot of people in this piece who had different points of view on what was happening in the country. People like former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. I want to give everyone a chance to listen to one of his memories of this time.
Fearing more violence and kidnappings, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau put soldiers on the streets of Ottawa. Other soldiers protect prominent politicians, like the young cabinet minister, Jean Chrétien.
I'd go home in a car with policemen having a machine gun. But I'm telling you that they'll be protected for weeks. With guys having machine gun with them to protect you, you don't feel good.
What else did he share with you about his experiences then?
Well, his main point is that, it's quiet now, and it's quiet because we allowed democracy to take place. But of course, they had to get rid of the FLQ first, and that was not an easy matter, as you can imagine. The kidnappers of James Cross, they made a deal with the government, and off they went to Cuba. And the people who killed Laporte, of course, most of them spent much time in jail. Most of them are past now. But we did talk to one person who was an FLQ sympathizer and a member of the FLQ eventually. And he is still a separatist. He's a historian living in Montreal. Robert Como is his name, and he's written a book about this whole crisis. He's on our broadcast for the first exclusive interview with him on English Canadian television. And he talks very interesting, as you might imagine, about this whole period. So I think Canadians will find this, a real life drama of our own making. And it was part of my life for 25 years because I covered it from 1970 through until the end of the last referendum in 1995.
I'm so pleased you were the one to bring us this story. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
All right, W5's The Darkest Hours airs Saturday at 7 o'clock on CTV. Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to subscribe here.
And you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.
CTV's W5. A young life fascinated by the sea, dedicated to revealing the beauty beneath the waves.
His curiosity was always there.
Bound to protest senseless slaughter of its creatures.
Oceanic white-tip shark populations have dropped 99%.
A life tragically lost in the waters he cherished.
That was the last I saw of him.
Kevin Newman.
This was a surprise that he had the movie laid out.
Yeah.
With a story of courage, devotion, and loss.
Oh, it mattered that we found him. I wouldn't have stopped.
One man's fearless quest.
He knew absolutely the sharks would never get him.
One family's will to finish his journey.
It's been a heroic effort on their part to finish their son's mission.
Its shockwaves felt around the world.
A well-known Toronto filmmaker is missing at sea tonight.
And a dream that sparked a revolution.
And we have a whole new generation of people who have been inspired by Rob.
Here is Kevin Newman.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. Rob Stewart was the world's foremost advocate for sharks. Through his films, his diving, and his advocacy, the young Canadian single-handedly challenged our fear of sharks and helped protect them. He died last year, not even 40, during a diving mishap
while he was filming his latest movie, Sharkwater Extinction. W5 has been granted access to outtakes from that movie and to his family and friends who helped complete it. It's the first time they've spoken in public at length about Ron.
You can do it.
The FLQ, Front de Libertation du Québec, or in English, Quebec Libertation Front, was a separatist group of Quebec that wanted a free Quebec from Canada. But not only a free Quebec, but a communist Quebec. The group started in 1963 and ended in 1970. The group was dissolved due to the lack of support by the people. The rebel group was formed by Georges Shoters and Norman Roy, and a few others. The FLQ would get their funding by robbing banks. The FLQ's first attack was on March 7th of 1963, when 3 Molotov cocktails were sent off at guards, but no damage was done. The second attack, on April the 1st of the same year, was damaging a part of the railway that went from Montreal to Quebec City. Again, no real damage was done. Attacks like this happened a lot during the 60s, but in October of 1970, the FLQ kidnapped Pierre Laporte, a provincial cabinet minister, and the diplomat of the United Kingdom, James Cross. During all of this, support was strong for the FLQ, but when it came out that the FLQ killed Pierre, the support stopped.
No shit.
During the October crisis, the name of the event, Prime Minister Trudeau, no, the other one, used the Wars Measures Act, which is the only time in Canadian history that it has been used in peacetime. After a while of negotiations, the FLQ released Cross. Most of the kidnappers left Cuba. The rest were arrested. This ended the FLQ's reputation, and so it was dissolved. One of the demands of the FLQ during the crisis was the publication and broadcasting of their manifesto, which you could still read online. In conclusion, the FLQ was a group with dreams of a free and communist Quebec, yet failed due to their own errors. There have been over 160 violent incidents during the life of the FLQ and the death of 8 people. All of this gave them a bad light, losing all of their support at the end.
That's it.
Red flag, fist to the sky.
Huh? Oh.
Is viewed as future independent UN members, and it came incredibly close to this. In 1995, a vote for independence was defeated by the narrowest of margins. However, in the 2.5 decades since then, the topic appears to have dropped off the agenda. We certainly don't hear much about it in the news anymore. So, is it right to suppose that Quebec no longer wants independence?
No, Quebec.
At little under 10 million square kilometres, or 3.9 million square miles, Canada is the second largest of the 193 members of the United Nations after the Russian Federation. According to current estimates, its population stands at around 38 million, putting it in 39th place between Poland and Morocco. A federal system, Canada is made up of 10 provinces and 3 territories. The largest province is Quebec, which is 1.5 million square kilometres or 600,000 square miles. This makes it roughly the same size as Ukraine. In terms of population, it's the second largest Canadian province with around 8.5 million inhabitants. But what sets Quebec apart from the rest of the country is language. While Canada is officially bilingual, with English and French both recognised as official languages, across the country as a whole, around 80% speak English as their first language. In contrast, in Quebec, 80% speak French as their primary language. Although the presence of the Indigenous people of Canada stretches back thousands of years, the story really starts at the beginning of the 16th century when French explorers and traders first made their way to what is now Quebec and established the first settlements of what would eventually become New France. By the middle of the 17th century, France had extended its colonial holdings across North America down to the Gulf of Mexico. However, in 1763, following the 7 Years' War, it was forced to cede its North American holdings east of the Mississippi River to Britain under the terms of the Treaty of Paris. Crucially, the treaty also stipulated that Britain would allow the Catholic French inhabitants of the relinquished territories to continue to practice their religion. This was confirmed in 1774 under the terms of the Quebec Act, which also confirmed the continued use of French civil law in the province. In 1791, following the end of the US War of Independence and the establishment of the United States of America, the province was divided into 2 separate parts: the predominantly French-speaking Lower Canada and English-speaking Upper Canada, which bordered the US and became a haven for many of the loyalists who had left the United States. In the decades that followed, tensions grew between the communities. In 1837, a rebellion broke out in Lower Canada, exposing the rifts that had emerged between English and French speakers. In 1841, the 2 territories were merged to form a single unit, the Province of Canada, a step deliberately designed to quell French agitation. Notably, it was also stipulated that English would be Canada's sole official language. In 1867, Canada united with 2 other British colonies, Nova Scotia
and New Brunswick to form a confederation, the Dominion of Canada. From there, the country expanded rapidly, acquiring Rupert's Land and the Northwestern Territory in 1870, the colony of British Columbia in 1871, and the Arctic Islands in 1880. Meanwhile, as the country evolved and became divided into various provinces, the boundaries of Quebec also changed. In 1898, it expanded northwards, followed by a further expansion in 1912. It assumed its current borders in 1927, when the territory of Labrador was officially ceded to neighbouring Newfoundland, which was then a separate dominion. Throughout all of this, Quebec retained its strong Francophone and Catholic identity. But as time passed and Canada had expanded to take in other English-speaking territories, it came to be increasingly at odds with the rest of the country, not only socially, but politically and economically. In 1960, a new liberal, modernising provincial government took power in Quebec and instituted what came to be known as the Quiet Revolution. Although the administration driving the changes was federalist in outlook, the greater sense of self-confidence that emerged in Quebec at this time now fed calls in many quarters for a looser relationship with Canada, if not full independence. In response to these trends, the Canadian government, under Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, himself from Quebec, and the father of the country's current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, began to push back against Quebec nationalism. One particularly important step included making French an official language of Canada as a whole. However, the separatist mood continued to grow. In 1976, the Parti Québécois to power on a platform promising what was termed a sovereignty association. Quebec would become independent in most regards, but would share certain governmental functions with Canada, such as a currency. On 20th of May 1980, the ideas were put to a referendum. However, they were rejected by 59.6% of the electorate. In the years that followed, the Parti Québécois made no attempt to hold another referendum, and it was voted out of power in 1985. However, slightly less than a decade later, the party returned to power. Repeating the call for Quebec to become sovereign and again outlining areas of shared functions, it called for another referendum. This second vote took place on the 30th of October 1995. Out of just over 5 million registered voters, 4.75 million went to the poll, a remarkably high turnout of 93.5%. The final result was incredibly tight. The proposals were defeated by the narrowest of margins, 50.6% to 49.4%. In real terms, this amounted to just under 55,000 votes. While the independence campaign appeared to have been held off, it nevertheless led to some important developments in the years that followed. The first of these was the Canadian government's request for the country's Supreme Court to provide a ruling on whether Quebec could potentially secede unilaterally from Canada. On the 20th of August 1998, the court delivered its decision. In a ruling that's helped to shape wider approaches to secession, the judges argued that there was no right to unilateral secession under Canadian or international law. However, and importantly, the court also noted that in the event that Quebec clearly voted to secede, Canada should not deny them that right. However, both parties should negotiate in good faith and recognizing the interests of various other parties, including the other provinces and the federal government. This in turn led to the second major development. In July 2000, the Canadian Parliament passed what's called the Clarity Act. This set out the way in which questions of secession should be handled in future. First of all, it stipulated that any referendum question must be clear. Secondly, in the event of a vote for independence, any subsequent negotiations on separation must be held with all the provinces of Canada, as well as the country's Indigenous peoples. Thirdly, any act of secession would require an amendment to the Canadian Constitution. In other words, while Canada was willing to entertain the idea of secession, it had to be done in a democratic and consensual manner. And although Quebec has refused to officially accept the law, it nevertheless provides a framework for its secession, potentially in the future. So, where does this leave the independence movement now?
A quarter of a century after the last referendum, all the polling suggests that support for independence has declined significantly. Today, it would seem to enjoy support from between a quarter and a third of the population. More to the point, a clear majority would definitely vote against independence. This also seems to be supported by voting figures. The two largest parties in Quebec, which together polled about 3/4 of the electorate at the last provincial elections in 2018, oppose independence. So, what's led this move against independence? As one might expect, there are a complex range of reasons. In part, it would seem to be down to a shift of focus away from outright independence to a focus instead on political and cultural autonomy. As many observers point out, while support for independence has dropped, Quebec nationalism nevertheless remains strong. The largest party in Quebec, while opposing independence, is considered to be nationalist in outlook and actually supports greater autonomy for the province. Tied to this, further steps seem to have been taken to preserve Quebec's French language identity. While French has been the sole official language since the 1970s, many felt that English had been steadily encroaching in many areas. New laws to tighten up enforcement and the establishment of an office to ensure the everyday use of French in civil administration seems to have helped ease those fears. But perhaps most importantly, demographic changes also seem to be playing a part. Whereas in many places, pro-independence support appears to be stronger in the young, in Quebec, it's the opposite. Those supporting separation tend to be over 55. The young seem far more at ease with having a Canadian and a Francophone identity. Polling suggests just a quarter would vote for independence. This is significant as it would seem to suggest that support for independence will continue to decline in the years ahead. All this said, it's still perhaps too early to say that the independence movement is at an end in Quebec. While it's certainly far less pronounced than it once was, it still commands support amongst us.
Obviously, you don't live here.
The kidnapping of James Richard Cross by the terrorist Front de Libération du Québec was a startling but not unexpected departure from the violent path the FLQ took early in 1963. First known as l'Armée de Libération Québécois, they introduced terrorism to Canadians with painted slogans and Molotov cocktails. Then they graduated to dynamite time bombs, homemade, crude, but deadly. The terrorist targets were symbols of anything Anglo-Saxon or federal. Posh homes in Westmount, mailboxes, statues, government buildings. And if they were interested in attacking symbols only, well, innocent people, including 2 women, were killed. Now here's the Cross case. In a report I did 2 weeks ago on the rising theft of dynamite in Quebec, I quoted the warning of a well-known Montreal police officer who said, "The next move of the FLQ will be a political kidnapping, and you can bet on it." The FLQ was the terrifying result of years of frustration among French-Canadian ultranationalists. They said they got nowhere with words. Perhaps someone up there in Ottawa would listen to exploding bombs. The quiet revolution turned bloody one May evening in '63, and William Vincent O'Neill, a 65-year-old veteran of 2 world wars, 1 month away from pension, became the first victim of an FLQ attack. The bombings escalated, and federal, provincial, and municipal police quickly organized their combined police anti-terrorist squad. The targets were still inanimate, but people did get hurt.
Army explosive expert Walter Leja tried to remove a bomb from a Westmount mailbox that exploded, maiming him for life. He wore no protective clothing on his last bomb disposal mission that Black Friday in '63. The Combined Police Anti-Terrorist Squad had little trouble smashing the first terrorist cell, but other cells became smaller, more sophisticated, and police infiltration was almost impossible. But informers and big rewards eventually put the cells out of trouble. Public reaction to the bombings varied. Mailboxes and deserted buildings were one thing. These brought puzzlement, some anger, fear. But when innocent people were killed or injured in a terrorist attack, the cry for police action became shrill. 27 injured Montrealers were carried or hobbled out of the Montreal Stock Exchange building when the FLQ struck on a February afternoon in 1969. Pierre-Paul Geoffroy had demolished the visitors' gallery and the trading floor with a 10-pound bomb. The kidnapping of James Richard Cross by the terrorist Front de Libération du Québec was a startling but not unexpected
I like how I didn't get one ad yet.
Ville-Jacques-Cartier was a working class suburb which has existed from 47 to 69. It was amalgamated to Longueuil in 69, and it was a very important working class suburb. At the beginning, there were no streets, no sewers. There were fields, in fact, and the people went there to become owner of some fields and to build their own house. So some of the main figures of Ville-Jacques-Cartier went from this town, and they developed their consciousness of inequality, because there were very great inequality between Longueuil and Ville-Jacques-Cartier. Longueuil was the place where people were richer, and Ville-Jacques-Cartier was the place of poor people. And it was very clear for some people like Pierre Vallière or the brothers Rose and also Francis Simard, then there were inequality and injustice. We should remember Ville-Jacques-Cartier today because it was a very original working class suburb. There were some working class suburbs on the southwest of Montreal, but here it's on the South Shore, and some people went during the housing crisis after the World War II. They went here and they built themselves their houses. They were very proud of this, and it was so important. This development was so important that the little city of Longueuil decided to amalgamate with Ville-Jacques-Cartier because it has literally developed greatly during its 22 years of existence.
Good evening, everyone. In recent weeks, the pandemic has worsened around the world, including here in Quebec. The situation in our hospitals is critical, especially in Montreal. There are still too many visits in homes. That's why I'm announcing that starting next Saturday, there'll be a curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. during 4 weeks. So after 8 p.m., we won't be allowed to go out in streets except for work. During the day, we also need to reduce contacts in houses. Many non-essential activities will also continue to be closed until February the 8th. It'll be mandatory to work from home for office workers. All non-essential businesses as well as places of worship will remain closed until February the 8th. Funerals will be authorized for a maximum of 10 people. Groceries will have to close at 7.
We didn't even get that. Go away! Oh. Wait. Well, that changes fucking every time. Fuck!
For me, French was always outside of home. The moment I would cross the door, like I would walk outside, that was it. That was French. And inside the home, it was always Spanish. That was like uno, two, three, cat.
I don't think we need special powers. I'm as good as you are, Barbara. I'm as good as any English-speaking Canadian from any province. And I believe most Canadian young businessmen, artists, writers, performers, sportsmen, they think they're as good as anyone. Who needs special powers? The politicians. They're the ones who want special powers naturally because they're in the power game. And what they can get from Ottawa, they will have more in Charlottetown, in Quebec City, in Victoria, BC. That's the game of politics, power. But you don't need to live in an Ontario with special power to protect you. You have a Charter of Rights which protects you. You say you're as good as anyone else under the Charter. Women, men, black, white, Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, they're all equal under the Charter. Now, what about these politicians saying, well, we need special powers? I don't need politicians with special powers to protect me because I'm no weaker than you are, and I don't need to be more protected than you are.
You know, As they used to say in the Senate, which I served in for so long.
I don't think we need special powers in Quebec. I'm as good as you.
Lorsque vous avez décidé d'enlever James Cross, quel était votre objectif premier à ce moment-là? Est-ce que c'était la libération des prisonniers politiques ou c'était vraiment de faire avancer la cause nationale?
C'était de faire avancer la cause nationale, puis on se disait à travers ça, l'avancée qu'il avait pu faire. Donc, on calculait que camarades
politique ou c'était vraiment de faire avancer la cause nationale?
C'était de faire avancer la cause nationale, puis on se disait à travers ça, on considérait que la situation politique de l'époque, après le coup de la Bring, aux élections d'avril 70, où le Parti québécois avait quand même pas reculé, mais avait quand même pas pu faire les avancées qu'il avait pu faire. Donc, on calculait qu'une action violente, mais sans effusion de sang, contribuerait à faire avancer la cause. Et en même temps, on voulait beaucoup plus que la diffusion du manifeste, on voulait obtenir la libération des camarades qui étaient en prison.
Mais la priorité entre les deux, est-ce que c'était vraiment la cause? Parce que votre frère était un des prisonniers politiques. On a pu penser que c'est ça qui avait fait que vous étiez si impatient d'agir.
Non, parce que mon frère étant prisonnier à ce moment-là, au mois de juin, il s'était fait arrêter quelques mois plus tôt, justement en préparant l'enlèvement du diplomate américain Burgess. Donc, c'était pas une question, on s'est retranché, on a choisi James Cross parce qu'on connaissait bien ses habitudes, mais c'était pas une question d'urgence à cause qu'il y avait quelqu'un dans la famille qui était en prison, parce que cette urgence-là existait depuis quand même plusieurs années, parce que les camarades qui étaient en prison, c'était nos camarades, c'était la grande famille du FLQ, de tous les opposants, et c'était pour moi des gens qui méritaient qu'on s'occupe d'eux, qu'on les libère.
Vous avez dit c'était d'utiliser la violence, mais sans effusion de sang. Ça, c'était très clair dès le départ.
C'est-à-dire que c'était très clair. On s'était dit, on était des gens remplis d'idéaux sociaux, tout ça. On avait lu Arsène Lupin, je compare ça un petit peu, c'est peut-être un peu exagéré, là, mais on voulait, un peu comme les Tupamaros aussi frappaient à ce moment-là en Uruguay, on voulait faire des grands coups de chapeau, obtenir des victoires sur le pouvoir pour faire avancer la cause, mais en même temps de façon propre, de façon très habile, très intelligente, et on voulait agir en fait, de façon intelligente et non pas avec des gros sabots. Et on voulait pas que personne meure là-dedans. Et je me souviens que quand Cross est rentré dans la maison, je pense que les premiers jours, on lui a dit à James Cross, écoutez, il n'y a pas question pour vous qu'on touche à un cheveu de votre tête. Premièrement, c'était pour le tranquilliser parce qu'on voulait pas qu'il devienne hystérique. Et deuxièmement, parce qu'on se sentait pas capable du tout de tuer quelqu'un froidement. Le FLQ voulait un peu une réponse à la violence du système. C'est comme ça que ça se définissait. Et la police avait tué personne. La police avait, moi j'avais déjà été battu par la police en prison, mais au moins on n'était pas le Brésil. Donc, il n'y avait pas eu mort d'homme. Donc, on ne pouvait pas dépasser, aller plus loin que la répression avait fait.
Le manifeste, c'est vous qui l'avez rédigé. Lorsqu'il a été lu en ondes, est-ce que vous avez eu l'impression que c'était une grande victoire pour vous?
J'ai rédigé avec un autre camarade de l'époque. C'est certain que mais on n'a pas réalisé sur le coup l'impact que pouvait avoir le manifeste. On l'a vu dans les jours suivants. Je pense que ce calcul-là aussi, sans doute, Pierre-Éliott Trudeau ne l'a pas réalisé. Parce que nous, on se disait dans la tête, c'est beaucoup plus facile pour le pouvoir d'ouvrir les prisons, de dire, bon, écoutez, il y a 23 personnes qui sont là, qui s'en aillent à Cuba, qui s'en aillent en Algérie, peu importe, on les reverra plus, un peu comme ils ont fait pour nous, qui s'en aillent et qui ne reviennent plus ici. C'était beaucoup plus facile pour eux, alors que le manifeste, il y avait quand même des idées là-dedans, il y avait quand même un potentiel émotif qui était énorme. Et en accordant cette lecture-là, d'après moi, c'est un calcul que Pierre-Éliott Trudeau il s'est trompé dans son calcul parce qu'on l'a vu dans les jours suivants où il y a eu énormément sur les hotlines, tout ça, énormément de sympathie. Les gens se disaient contre la violence, c'était normal, il n'y a personne qui peut se dire pour la violence, contre la violence du FLQ, mais pour les objectifs du manifeste. Il y a même des curés qui se sont prononcés à Cabano ou ailleurs qui sont prononcés pour les objectifs sociaux du manifeste.
Est-ce que ça vous a surpris, cette réaction-là?
Ça nous a surpris, ça nous a beaucoup... ça nous a surpris, oui, parce qu'on ne pensait pas qu'il y aurait... il faut dire qu'on était énormément préoccupés par des problèmes de communication. Il n'existait pas à l'époque, l'Université du Québec, où on n'était pas des spécialistes, mais on voulait énormément communiquer à travers le Québec. On savait que le Québec, c'était un pays qui était immensément vaste, les communications étaient difficiles, les communications routières, tout ça. On voulait que les Québécois, du nord au sud...
Do you think your actions were justified? Like, basically being like, do you guys not get that you kind of like completely discredit any kind of meaning behind what you're doing when you're kidnapping like one individual who that this guy doesn't have anything to do with what you're upset about. He does not control the things that you're upset about. It's just one dude. The fuck you going after this one? You don't have any credibility anymore. Because what you're doing is nonsensical. Doesn't make sense.
I have no idea who this is.
This is the guy that did the bomb shit.
Oh.
That ended up killing one of the politicians.
Oh.
And they were like, they made it a point to be like, it wasn't accidental, but it had to happen. Like, I don't know, it's just like a bunch of people who they obviously fucking are guilty of murder. And they're fucking asking them, like, what the fuck what were you thinking? Like, why would you do this? And they're just, like, trying to justify it. There's no justification for it. And they're talking about fucking nationalist sympathizers.
Sympathizers?
Yeah. So, like, apparently people from all over Canada who also feel bad for Quebecers who are having their things and rights taken away from them and being oppressed, and they feel bad for them, and they agree that French should be Canada's first language, even. That's how far they'll go with it. Like, the rest of Canada, not only do they not give two fucks about what goes on here, absolutely, they like, what are you talking about? Most of Canada does not know French. And they're talking, like, I went and looked at a couple people who were, like, not from Canada, who were kind of going into, like, the history of Canada. Oh, also, there's a board of teachers now who are all saying, what is it? Hybrid learning. They want to make it illegal. Hybrid learning. And they said because, well, it's too difficult to keep track of your students, even though you have less students in your class, because some of them are doing at-home learning. It's like you do half and half, and they're like, well, we can't get a good read on where they're at. I'm like, it has nothing to do with the fact that they're looking at reforming the school fucking education system and the curriculum that we're being taught. It has nothing to do with that, no? I guarantee you it has everything to do with the new curriculum they want to put in place, because there was literally like a flutter of conversation about it. What? What?
Got paint on her foot. And she just licked it. There's all paint everywhere. I need to get a paper towel. She just licked that paint off her paw. Fuck. Okay. Before she gets, because that's poison, eh?
Cameron?
Well, it's not like I'm. It's not, what? You'd be freaking out if it was Jack. She went over there.
Gigi. Gigi. Did she leave the room?
Yeah, she followed you.
Gigi. Gigi. Hey, what's the matter? Oh. Where the fuck did the fucking cat go? Not you. God, hold her, please. Just throw the cigarette out, Cam. Drop the cigarette. Fuck.
Yeah, I know. Right here. You got paint on your pawsies? Huh? Yeah, I know.
Hold her.
Oh, I know, but
Well, you're fucking stupid. Don't fucking wash your paint.
it's a cat. Hmm? Okay.
Let her go outside of the room, please.
Oh, goodness.
You get out too. Oh. Yeah, what's that? Oh. Okay. Fuck's sake. Fuck. Oh my god. Get the fuck out of here.
Road shut down. Officers searching for clues.
Shut the fuck up. You can just search again. FLQ. Look at that.
That and other comments about Quebec came when the former Prime Minister went to Ottawa for a book launch. Our chief political correspondent, Jason Moskowitz, was there.
Every time Pierre Trudeau makes an appearance in the capital, there is interest. But just a week after the referendum votes were counted, Trudeau was topical, and no one knew that better than he did. Officially, he came to talk about a new book of his on foreign affairs. He tried to say he didn't want to talk too much about domestic matters, but he did.
It's only in the last, fortnight that when Mr. Bouchard began telling us lies.
Trudeau confirmed Federalist strategy called for him to stay out of the referendum campaign.
I respect the wisdom of those who determined the referendum strategy, so I sat on my hands.
Had Trudeau got into the campaign, the Federalists may have had even bigger problems. For example, in the dying days of the campaign, Prime Minister Chrétien promised distinct society. Yet the former Prime Minister says he is still very much opposed.
Quebec is distinct, so is Ontario. You can't be distinct from somebody without somebody being distinct from you, can you?
While the Chrétien government keeps talking about giving more power to the provinces, the champion of a strong central government says decentralization would be a mistake.
So if there's any give by the federal government, it will have to be traded against give by the provinces. And if they don't play that game, then Canada's finished.
I was in his government, yes. Trudeau's statement had government ministers like Lloyd Axworthy with some explaining to do.
One thing that I learned when I first joined the government under Mr. Trudeau back when was that you have to be open to adjustments and changes and doing things differently.
Canadians may have fully expected Pierre Trudeau to play a significant role in the referendum campaign. The fact he never uttered a single public statement is an indication of the degree to which federal strategists considered him more of a liability than an asset. Jason Moskowitz, CBC News.
Call me motherfucker. Ow.
Mr. Legault, you referred to Bill 96 as the new Bill 101. And you also alluded to it, but I'm not sure if you concretely answered the objectives of this bill. Do you have a certain number that you want to attain, a certain percentage? Where do you see, I mean, obviously, when you call this a new Bill 101, you're alluding to the fact that Bill 101 the original Bill 101 didn't go far enough. So what are the concrete objectives that you want to attain with this new Bill 101?
Well, the objective is clear. We want to make sure that in the future we still speak French, especially in Montreal. So right now, when you look at the figures, we're not going in the right direction.
Mrs. Jean-Lambert?
Yes, maybe as I said in French before, it's the linguistic transfer for new immigrants. It's really important in Quebec here, the linguistic transfer, it's 52%. And all the demographics said that we need to attend 90% of linguistic transfer. For example, in the rest of Canada, it's 99% of linguistic transfer to the English language. So we need to improve that percentage from 53 to more and more.
All y'all people are fucking terrible fucked in the head, people.
I think this is a curious place for me to suggest a meeting. What? The surprises have only just begun. You look a little unsteady, Mr. Shelby. Take a seat. Together. The guys was your idea. You chose me. Money I thought the thing is a policy. Enough. Hey, I'm not mixing the personal with the political.
I said enough.
I think I will decide on what is enough.
Oh, who's in charge here then? Eh? Who's in charge? Wait, let me understand this. You answer to an agent of the Crown.
Perhaps we can Perhaps we can stick to the agenda.
Whose agenda?
There's a form of words here.
Whose words?
Arrogant bastard.
I'm not accustomed to being spoken to like that.
Just come to order.
I'm here to listen, but not to the fucking infantry.
Enough! Jesus! Some weeks ago, Mr. Shelby carried out a military mission on behalf of pro-treaty Republicans here in Birmingham.
You. Working for the king.
There is a unique political situation.
Yeah. How does that feel?
Let us
tell me. How does that fucking feel?
Temporarily, we have a shared interest.
So just stop laughing. You want me to stop laughing? Explain this part.
Following the success of your mission,
We're gonna make you do it again.
We need to shut up.
can we just conduct ourselves here, please? Conduct ourselves!
Please.
No one in this room wants to breathe the same air as anyone else.
Nevertheless, the pro-treaty parties and the king want the same man dead. Am I right? I am.
Did you ask why in France?
Yeah.
So it's the same answer. Because.
Why me?
Because.
Because. So if anyone connects me to this, it will be assumed that it was a criminal act and not a political one.
No. You need not fear being connected to the killing, because I will see to it that no connection is ever made. You will have complete immunity after the fact. But in the execution, you will get no help from agents of the crime.
And we can't be said to do that.
Oh.
You've been chosen, Mr. Shelby. Well, there really is no choice.
No,
Medium double.
Like,
Yeah, that's
in
all.
your mind, here it shed no tears as he looks the
Oh,
other
we
way.
got brownies and pizza. Hope it doesn't smell in here.
What?
I said, I hope it doesn't smell in here.
What do you mean?
I don't know, like snakes or something.
What are you talking about?
Mr. Shelby,
Why would it smell?
I don't know.
what about your export license, Mr. Shelby? You had a deal with Mr. Churchill.
Oh, wait, I need my wallet.
Don't let me. Yes, fine. He's working for the
I used to pick up a pack of smokes.
Sure, how many do you have?
Well, I had
Security vetted by my own department.
I have met in places your men can't go. Don't let me miss anti-cheesy baddies in the back room. The mother red cap insultly, sometimes twice a week. These Irish enemies are fucking brothers.
I guess
Super slipped into a world you don't understand.
What you're saying is true. He'll be dealt with.
In the truth. That's why he's dead. Let me have a gift.
Mr. Shelby, what you think?
On you go.
Hey, please, can we just like cooperate? Can you? Go for a walk? Lord. You're all wet. God damn it.
The baby's day's gone. I'll protect you now. Oh, shut up. Stop fucking whinging. Down to my razor blade and a few complaints from the neighbours about the terrible fucking music. You want to tell them or should I? This place is under new management. I order the thinking line.
I know the one fucking near the canal. I'm sure there's one fucking on Shore Road actually.
Since when do you drink Tim Hortons?
She does, I don't.
Vacancy's been filled.
I drink Starbucks then. Fucking
Well, according to this morning's paper.
bourgeoisie.
Bougie is just fancy for expensive.
Bourgeoisie. Yeah.
Last top of the class in mathematics. And I did a night school
But
course in
no,
accountancy.
and I know what good coffee is.
Mum says you've had 6 different accounting clerks in the last 6 months. Respectable men see the other things you do. They leave. I, not Lizzie out there, will be known.
We're supposed to go out.
Mum
Are
says she
you
wants to be
ready?
80% legal within 2
And then-
years. 3.
I'm surprised that it's been okay up until now.
Like with
Because like she even goes like camping without him. She goes to all her work friends, and then they're supposed to be going to like, or she's supposed to be going to like a chalet for Halloween.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he
Let's be
just
proud
like
of this
doesn't give a shit that you're going to go sleep at a chalet alone. Like no. She was like, he could come, but he doesn't want to.
Probably not you there, Michael.
Because he doesn't like people.
I might see him Friday and go about this.
Well, damn, you gotta like do something sometimes.
Like that, I was just saying, you know what?
Wanna, like shit, I do that all the time.
But like, I was like, you know what? Tell him like,
That
like
was a joke.
you wonder why people like, I don't know. When people be nicer to you, you gotta be nice to people. That's the way it is. And people like he's super judgy, like of everybody.
We don't open for winnings yet.
I'm here to see Thomas Shelby.
I have an appointment.
He does like a little thing with passive aggressive like comments. Yeah, well, not everybody thinks that way masculine. It's like, hey.
No, you can't.
Mr. Shelby has his proper meetings in his other office.
Nah, you're super fucking judgmental of like
This was
everybody.
the address that he gave me.
Gave you
What
this
was it?
address.
He said it was a gambling
Some
den.
guy at work,
I told him that.
and they were having
Someone's reading
a
it.
private conversation on Messenger or whatever,
Anyway, he
and then the
said that
guy
I could come and have a look.
posted part of their conversation. It was nothing personal
I know, I
at
thought
all
it was
or anything like that, but like
Early in
he
his
was
night, I had
super
no idea.
mad at him.
The
He was like,
gambling den.
posted it, and it's my personal conversation. I'm
Wait.
like, but there's nothing personal about it.
But
It's
open the
just,
door
like,
again and all
funny
want to
joke.
come in.
There's
It's not
nothing like
flaws.
that is super like that you should be just upset about.
Mm.
He's like, well, he should have asked.
But what are you?
What am I?
Man,
Thomas.
Jesus Christ. This guy you works with.
His
Like,
graceful.
I'm like, so you know this person? He's like, look,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's this?
I've working for like 5 years. I'm like,
You?
I don't understand. What's your problem?
Riding. Except in a manger when I was
Not
a baby.
everybody likes to just fucking share everything in their life.
I'm
That
riding too.
like, okay, that's fine.
Fucking great Riley parked out there. Nobody's
He
watching
is.
it.
He's so huge. That's why I was
This
like,
woman says she's training
your
to
boyfriend. But like, I guess if we
So
think
it's
about it,
really
we've
actually-
had like some arguments about things that were like fucking seemed like
Yeah,
we should just blow out. Like, this is the end of our relationship. And then I look back now, I'm like, that's just the thing to be like in a fight.
Relative for a minute.
Yes, Thomas.
I'll show you around.
Fight you any day.
Oh.
So,
Ow.
come on, guess.
Ow, cold. Stop. Please. Thank you. Ugh.
Nothing wrong with this. I'm in John's office. That's where we start the runners and the riders.
It's out in the open. What about the police?
Got him.
I drove into smoking before I was going to get murdered. I mentioned your name. I think escorted to see a king.
And she also has 2 joints that
UK
I rolled for her,
what?
like, in July.
Wow.
Well, because I told her, I was like, just bug him enough, and eventually he'll smoke with you. And every time I'm like, so, Tony, today's the day. He's like, no, get away from me, Madison. And I'm drugged. Like, fucking pussy. Like, it'll be the best thing you ever fucking do. Trust me. You will fucking, the stick will fall right out your ass like a fucking porn star. Used and abused. Well, no, like, seriously though, like, fucking take the stick out of your ass. Like, your girlfriend does it, fucking, all your friends, fucking, don't you want to be cool? Oh, no, I want to go there and just, like, stay there and fuck with Tony. I just want him to freak out. It's gonna be so funny the day he fucking, like, loses his shit on me.
You're asking for it.
I am. I really am.
You are. I'm not gonna feel bad.
I'll apologize. Like, I'll take the heat. I don't mind. I want to know his breaking point. The shit that I gotta know. Where my line is with him. What can I push the limits to? Already, it's not going well. Well, for him, but it's going great for me. Okay. Can I borrow your phone just in case?
In case what? How we're gonna reach you? I guess through my own Facebook.
Yeah.
I guess you could
Thanks.
still use all my
I'm not gonna.
internet.
No, I'm not gonna use your internet at all.
Noticing that's been going up to like 90%.
Not 100.
Well, it's not just your internet. Don't use it all on me.
Ah, come on now. Stop that. Where the fuck are my boots? Come on, we'll go for a walk. Your breath smells.
Yours smells like alcohol. Probably the best thing.
I haven't even been drinking.
Really?
I haven't even been drinking.
It's like orange. Maybe it's just orange.
Maybe it's just you're used to orange juice smell.
There's a pack of gum there.
What kind of gum?
It's that Excel.
No.
The free one.
I don't like Excel. That shouldn't be long. I'll message you in a little bit. Ready? Come on, let's go.